This is Michael Cohen. Today, the topic is about planning on personal property because it could be a problem if you haven't adequately planned. In this case, it's about the famous artist Norman Rockwell, who has all these sketchings that are well known. Saturday Evening Post, for those who are older who remember this. In this case, it was revolves around a gift of Norman Rockwell paintings to the press secretary of Franklin D. Roosevelt. This is way back in the 40s. And here we're talking about it over 80 years or 75 years at least later. Um, so in this case, Rockwell gave these paintings or sketchings rather to the press secretary of Roosevelt. Those were the days before you couldn't you could before nowadays you can't give to an official anything like this. The laws have changed. But in any event, these paintings or excuse me sketchings were given to the press secretary. The press secretary eventually died in 1951. What happens um, from that is what happened before his death or after his death is the question, because here 70 some odd years later, the what happened was in 2017, the one of the sons of the press secretary was watching President Trump on TV and saw the artwork on the wall of the West Wing behind him. He said, "What's that?" "That's our artwork. That's our sketchings. What is that doing in the White House?" Well, he immediately called the White House and found out that an anonymous donor had given these sketchings to the White House during the Carter administration. By the way, it's nothing wrong with the presidents here. It's just an anonymous donor had given these uh, sketchings to the White House. President Biden has returned them to the donor, by the way. So what percentage? He said, "That's what do you mean an anonymous donor?" "I know it must be that no good nephew of mine. He's trying to hide those sketchings in plain sight." What do you mean? "He's trying to wash it." He said, "So I won't remember that the artwork is there because it's been hidden in the White House." So the son, who has now since died, has sued the state. Well, actually, it was his sister's. It was being kept at his sister's house before it was given to the White House. She has now since died. And it depends on how you look at things. Because here, the family, other than that sister's family, there's three kids, says, well, that should have gone from dad to mom and from mom to the three kids under mom's will, or by laws of intestacy if she didn't have a will. Well, but the grandson of the sister says, no, 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 no. Her dad gave it to mom when she graduated college in the 1940s. And then she gave it to my dad, who's now also since died. And so as a result, since it was a gift, it goes through only our side of the family. The son, who has since died, sued him for $350,000, plus saying that it should all be to all three. And that suit is ongoing. So what should that press secretary have done so that this wouldn't have occurred? Well, first of all, if it was a gift, well, he could have filed a gift tax return. Anything that's more than nowadays $17,000 a year is the annual exclusion. But what you're supposed to do if that's more than that, or whatever the annual exclusion was back in the 40s, then you're supposed the donor is supposed to report to the IRS. He worked in the government. He ought to know that. And obviously, Rockwell sketchings are worth millions, but there was no report. On the other hand, when the when there was when the will of either the grandmother or mother, depending on the way you look at it, died, and when actually the son died, there was no mention in the inventory as to that being an asset of the estate. So now we're left with the dilemma. Was it a gift or was it not a gift? And there's no proof either way. So it's going to be up to the courts. What should have been done? Well, you could have had a specific bequest. Could have been mentioned who gets what artwork, or at least have a memorandum, or at least say who could divide things, how. Sometimes when you have that, so it should have been clear in your estate planning documents. This has got to be one of the most valuable assets. So if you just said, um, okay, everything to my wife, okay, you could do that. That's fine. But if you wanted to say my children get this, if this was a series of artwork, one child gets this one child gets, it's hard to divide artwork because they have different values. So sometimes people use LLCs, limited liability companies, or trusts to put it in. So now it's all, part of ownership by all, if that's what he wanted. If it was a gift, obviously he should have filled out a gift tax return. Or said something in his estate planning documents that said, I made a gift to my daughter, so that all knew that this is what occurred. But nothing was said. A lot of times people have personal property memorandums. It's not binding. In some states it's binding, in some it's not. Sometimes people have lottery systems. Sometimes they have a thing called, there's some sites that tell you how to divide things. Sometimes there's family settlement agreements. Sometimes people have appointed a manager to deal with all the assets. So there's different ways to divide things. But we know this, when you have something valuable like that, you should probably address it. Hopefully you won't make the mistakes of this particular family, so that here it is 75 years later and they're fighting over things that were done a long, long time ago. So just be clear in your estate planning documents. When there's clarification, it makes it less likely that there'll be family feuds. Thanks for joining us today.